So guys, you hear me talk about the corporate media on this show every single day. I criticize the mainstream press because what they do is a disservice. Their focus of what should be important to average human beings is substituted by sensationalism, censorship, and lies 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And now that we're literally days away from 2013, it's important to look back to some of the most underreported or censored stories of the past year that have shaped the fabric of this country and the world. So on that note, to help me break down the biggest stories that the mainstream media missed in 2012, I'm joined by Breaking the Set producer, Manuel Rapolo.
Abby.
Hi. Thank you for coming on. So I think it's important first to talk about how censorship doesn't just mean the complete omittance of stories. It also means bias. It means framing stories in certain ways. And I wanted to really quickly go through this list. Number 5, Gaza. Number 4, the Afghanistan war. Number 3, drones, surveillance. Number 2, Bradley Manning. And number 1, the NDAA. So let's start with Gaza. I think to a lot of people who have been watching, the corporate news, they would be like, well, we did cover Gaza. The corporate news did cover the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The problem is that it's extremely biased. You hardly ever saw any, even alternative news, really criticize Israel. It was mostly just kind of showing Israel as the victim, and we see that a lot across the corporate media.
No, absolutely, and I think that that's one thing that you did on this show a lot during the crisis. You were covering what was going on the ground, but you were trying to cover it in an objective way that painted a picture that went back beyond, what the corporate media and the mainstream media was saying was kind of the catalyst for the event. Which, if you were tuning into CNN or tuning into MSNBC or Fox or or even BBC, and people were talking about, okay, why is this going on? Why is there another conflict? Oh, it's because Gaza fired rockets from Israel. You had a guest on this show, Phyllis Bennis, who has actually made a very, very good point, which is that the historical account begins when you start the clock. So if you are going to start talking about this Palestinian conflict based on rockets being fired from Gaza and not look back at the days before, the days leading up to this event where there were IDF soldiers, Israeli Defense Forces, actually in Gaza, there were tanks, there were bulldozers, that actually kind of changes the story a little bit. And then you can take it back decades, which is, of course, the occupation and how far back it goes. And I really quickly wanted to mention Oliver Stone actually just came out, a person who we just had on the show a couple days ago, who said the Jewish control of the media and the Jewish lobby in this country, I mean, it's really something that no one addresses, and it really does influence media, it influences Hollywood, and the government. So that's, that's something that Oliver Stone actually came out, a pretty controversial talking point, but it's one that's really blatant, It's true, and at the end of the day, this really is not about Semitism. This is not being about anti-Semitic or whatever. The thing about it is that if more Americans actually knew or actually exposed to the types of human rights abuses that the state of Israel perpetrates on a daily basis, I think that we would actually see an outcry and even condemnation of journalists that leave people, American citizens, in the dark about this
Which is what a lot of other countries do. Let's talk about Afghanistan. The Afghanistan war, so many people think it's over. Afghanistan war's over. We've pulled out. Basically, this year has proved the complete and utter failure in policy, that the surge, suicide rates of veterans now outnumber the deaths in combat. I mean, this is the long-term effects of what these wars do. But in Afghanistan itself, I mean, the surge in insider killings, green on blue killings. Now the strategic pact between Karzai government and the Obama administration to extend the troop deadline till 2024.
Which is not being talked about at all, and I think that that's one of the most underreported stories this year. Yes, every once in a while we hear that, yeah, we're still at war with Afghanistan, but nobody's talking about, are we really going to be pulling out in 2014? There's the strategic pact with Karzai's government, which, Karzai's government is really not popular in Afghanistan. If you look at the people that are surrounding him, it's all U.S. military and U.S. forces that are his bodyguards. I mean, what the United States is afraid of is that once the U.S. pulls out, it's going to be a Taliban control. The only way that they can actually avoid is not by staying to 2014, is actually extending this deadline to 2024.
Absolutely, and we just heard Blackwater bases, the Camp Integrity, the giant contract between the Special Operations troops there, and of course just the enormous amount of people who have died this year since Obama got elected, actually. Let's talk about drones. The expansion of drones. I feel like this year I've heard more about drones than any other year. I mean, it just seems like it's just escalated. Every country has them. We're sending drones to spy on Iran. At the extrajudicial assassination, judge, jury, executioner, these drones are just, it's the new face of war.
They're everywhere. And to the credit of the American corporate media, they have been covering it more this year than they had in the past. RT has been on this since early last year. But yeah, absolutely. The expansion of drone programs, not only abroad in places like Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan,
now Mali.
Mali, and even in Latin America, they're deploying them from Panama to kind of do anti-narcotics operations. But the expansion here in the United States, the fact that there are countless cities that have drones flying over like American airspace, that's a big deal. And I think that that's something that the mainstream media is not focusing on. The fact that we're, assassinating people in other countries, and that the backlash that's creating, the anti-American sentiment
It's
in places like
counterproductive.
Pakistan.
It creates more terrorists, as Jimmy Carter agrees with, and also, yeah, the chilling effect of drone surveillance here in the U.S. completely underreported. Manny, let's move on to Bradley Manning.
Sure.
What is as you've said, it's the symbol for kind of this whole front, the war on whistleblowers, 7 people charged with the Espionage Act under Obama administration. What else signifies kind of this case?
Actually, you do mention something very important. 7 people under the Obama administration charged under the Espionage Act. That's more than any other presidency in American history combined. This is a very archaic act, the Espionage Act, early 20th century, is still being used today, and under the Obama administration 7 times. And Bradley Manning has sort of become the poster child for whistleblowers. And the kind of message and the dangerous message and dangerous precedent that this sets for people that maybe in the military, federal employees, or the average citizen that wants to blow the whistle on something that they see happening, that they know is wrong, and then seeing kind of the effects of what's happened to Bradley Manning, being detained for how many days, 180 days, solitary confinement. Up until recently, we heard him speak. I mean, this sets a very, very dangerous precedent if you're a whistleblower.
There should be 10,000 more Bradley Mannings, but instead I fear that how he's been treated and the charges that he does face, they'll be less and less. And we have 1 minute left, but I wanted to get into the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, the law that literally, I mean, this is the story of the year. This is the story of the year.
Absolutely.
New Year's Eve last year, Obama signed this law to indefinitely detain American citizens, and there's just been a huge fight, the biggest unmentioned, underreported fight against civil liberties on the front of civil liberties in this country this last year.
Could not agree with you more. I mean, and we're talking about this being the story of the year, signed New Year's Eve. Since the first day of 2012, this was the law that was in place. And the fact that the Obama administration has been fighting so hard to keep that indefinite detention clause that states that the U.S. president can order the military to detain American citizens or U.S. residents indefinitely without due process, that's very, very dangerous. That's the biggest attack to U.S. civil liberties that we've seen in a very long time.
And we'll see what's going to happen with this Feinstein Amendment that perhaps will change that, but still, not allowing due process for all citizens. So we'll see what happens come this next year. Thank you so much for coming on, breaking down the top 5 underreported stories from the mainstream media. Of course, RT's been covering them all along. Appreciate your time, Manuel Rapolo.
Thanks, Abby. Happy New Year.